Hey, it's all about manufacturing and automation, and this is Gary Mintchell, editor-in-chief of Automation World Magazine. And today, this week's essay, I wanted to do a little bit, rather than a roundup of news, thinking about education. Now, some of this comes because last 2 weeks I've been on the road, went out to the San Francisco Bay Area. I was in San Jose, Palo Alto, and out that way. And one of the things I attended was at Stanford University, the MIT Stanford University Venture Labs called VLab. And this is a learning experience for entrepreneurs, really, and also graduate students. I'm not sure if it's just business or maybe business and technology. And one of the things they did, this was on the Internet of Things, but in general, it was venture capitalists and technologists and entrepreneurs and students getting together. And what they were doing was learning about a new technology area, but they were also learning about venture capital and a little bit about startup companies. Some of the speakers were with a startup company, and a little bit of sharing of ideas at that level. And then last week, I visited Austin, Texas, and Houston, Texas, and I was there for a number of things. And one of the things I went to, I visited Emerson Process Management, and talked to some people about their virtual training they're doing now. Now, pretty much every company will do training of some kind on their systems or products or whatever. And recognizing that with a lot of downsizing has been going on for years now, actually several years, people, and then the economy, so people aren't traveling, can't travel, don't have the budget to travel, don't have the time to travel, all this kind of thing. And so Emerson has a really cool virtual learning experience where they have an instructor in the classroom, which is okay, pretty cool, except you make an appointment and you're at maybe your office, but maybe the office isn't a really good place to be, so you're at home. They've had some experiences with people at home. There's two-way video camera. You can watch the instructor. You have your own Delta V system there in the classroom that the instructor can watch as they go through things. They'll see your lights blinking and stuff like that, that you're actually doing stuff. And you can chat, some of the technologies of the web. So you can do chats, you can talk back. There's a number of things you can do. And so it's a continuing education experience for people who are going to configure and install and play with Delta V process control systems. But there's a lot of different things. I grew up listening to my grandfather, who had, at the time when I knew him, he actually sold real estate. But he told stories about his youth when he dropped out of high school and learned to become a machinist. And he learned at the company, at the Monarch Machine Company in Sydney, Ohio, which is, of course, where I'm from. But they taught him to be a machinist. He learned about manufacturing, and then he got other jobs and went around, and eventually was hired into Frigidaire, and that was a division of General Motors. And they sent him off to GMI, General Motors Institute, where he learned a lot more about manufacturing management. He became a production superintendent. Some of the stuff he taught me, which was like lean manufacturing before there was lean manufacturing, he talked about, after all these classes, he would share some of the things he learned in those classes, not even realizing I was eventually going to go into manufacturing. I was just a little kid. Talked about when they converted the refrigerator manufacturing facility into a submachine gun bolt manufacturing facility in World War II. And these were parts for guns for airplanes. And he talked about, they would, I'll never forget it. He just talked about just common sense. They called him over, and General comes over and gives him the patriotic pitch, we need help over here, and we know it's going to be a big chore. And he says, so I went up on the mezzanine, I look over the shop, and I would see somebody with a punch press, and they're doing an operation, and they'd fill up one of those big metal crates, if you remember those. If you ever worked in manufacturing, you know what those are. And then a guy would come with a little metal hook, and he'd grab it, and then he'd pull it across the shop to the next machine to do the next operation, and it'd sit there. And so I would walk all the way across, grab it with the hook, and drag it over to the next operation. And he said, I watched that for about a half a day and thought, well, this doesn't make a lot of sense. Why don't we arrange these machines in order? So he shut everything down, rearranged all the machines, increased production, and I'm sure he did other things in that. But it's a story I remember. But he was taught by the companies. And I happened to do some other reading, and on TechCrunch. TechCrunch is a technology blog that I like to read, a news source, and a guy by the name of Vivek Wadhwa is an entrepreneur, venture capitalist now, and he talks about doing some research into education and training. And to kind of preface this a little bit more, I remember, Grandpa talking about being apprenticeships, and there was apprenticeships, you get a job, and the company would train you into what the company needed. And then they got this philosophy where we want to hire people already trained. So all of a sudden they told the high schools, we want already trained people and exactly what we want. Oh, by the way, we don't want to pay any taxes toward the schools, but we want employees that do just what we want. So Vivek and his team, academic team, did some research, and they went to India. And guess what they discovered in India? If we keep hearing about they're graduating hundreds and thousands of engineers and all this, he says, well, first off, they're not graduating as many engineers as popularly said. And second off, they don't always graduate with everything they need to know. Well, duh. I mean, we all know that. How many people have you hired right out of college and they're ready to jump right in and be 100% productive right away? And he says they may spend up to 8 months training people, paying them. You hire them, you bring them in, you send them to your training schools, you train them in what you need them to do so that they're proficient in what you need, so that when they get busy, then they're very productive. And guess what? They're growing like crazy. There's all kinds of jobs over there, and yet they're retaining people at a better rate than we're retaining people over here. And I think part of it, and they think part of it, has to do with this education and training where you've invested in them, they invest back. I had a job, my last job before I was in an editor, and the company was afraid to train all of us, and I got some nice training. But I left, and that's what they were afraid of. We were going to train these guys, and they're going to go leave. Well, one of the problems was they didn't pay well, and you sort of need a reciprocal. If I'm going to increase my training, I need to get something in return. But so there's always this fear of training, but training is kind of interesting, and I'm thinking that we really should, take a look at the way we're teaching, and that companies need to do a little bit of this training. A couple of other things, and I'll have all these links on my blog, GaryMinchellsFeedForward.com, or on the YouTube notes or the other notes that I do on this. I'll put links. Robert Scoble, known technical evangelist and I don't know, technology try everything once guy, has an interview with a woman who has started up, and she's a bit of an education entrepreneur. Very good interview, and it's got a lot of good points about education, just in general. And to me, it's real easy to knock public education and not even understand what you're talking about. It is so broad and complex. There's good going on. There's bad going on. There's bad management. I did part of a time of trying to get a big reduction in the top structure and get more funds down to where it meets the kids. But there's a lot going on. There's a really good interview that you really need to see. And they talk about things like putting the learner at the center and surrounding the learner with technology so that they can learn, give kids stuff and give them some incentive and let them go explore. That's the way I learned, quite frankly. I learned stuff in school, but I learned more by reading and studying and checking stuff out on my own. And then there's a second blog. Seth Godin is a marketing guy with pithy comments on his blog, and he links to a speaker speaking with an old poem called "What Do Teachers Make?" And somebody says, well, you're just a teacher, what do you make? And he starts out, it's a poem, if you will, and he goes, I make kids think, and he goes on like that. Excellent video. I recommend it. I will put links to it everywhere where this thing appears. Something to think about as, I'm not really talking to teachers here, but maybe you could all become kind of teachers anyway. So anyway, my thoughts are this week on education. What are you doing to help educate the next generation? And perhaps you could support something. Maybe you can get involved in Lego League or First Robotics or something where you can mentor and you can help out. So anyway, this is Gary Mintchell signing off.